one of the big things that I stress with my students is I kind of start with discussions on what their experience in math was like. What happened when this happened, or what happened when you got an answer wrong in class or on an assignment or whatever. And of course, it always comes back that they had to get up on the board and do a problem, and they felt ostracized, and so we talk about don't force a child to ever go up there and do the math. They might even be good at it, but the minute they get up in front of people, and math is not about how quickly you can get a right answer, or how it's we don't expect that from science. When we run an experiment, we know some experiments fail, some don't. And with math, you need patience, you need time, you need perseverance. And so that's the big thing, is recognizing what mistakes are. Mistakes aren't, errors as you're working on the problem aren't mistakes, they're learning opportunities. And so one of the activities I do is I ask them, when you got a paper back in math that had red marks on it, how did it make you feel, first of all? Of course, it doesn't make anybody feel good. And then I always ask, what did it tell you? How did it help you? Well, it didn't. It just told me I was wrong. I said, that's not your job as a teacher. Your job as a teacher is not to tell your students that they're wrong. It's, if they're wrong, find out why they are wrong, and then teach them a better way to do it and guide them to the right answer. And so, for example, one of the multiplication table. People love the multiplication table. Actually, they hate it. Teachers end up loving it. And when I taught, I threw it out basically when I was teaching elementary. And it started because when I started teaching, I started out middle school math and science. And we were working on some fraction stuff, and I realized my 8th graders did not have their multiplication facts mastered. I mean, they're in 8th grade, they should be able to immediately know what 9 times 7 is. And they couldn't. And so I just gave them a quick assessment, where they do the 144 problems, and they did not have it. So I went back and did some things where it was still repetition, it was still going over it, but rather than using the times table and multiplication table, because then all they're doing is they're memorizing patterns. And so you'll have a student that does really, really well, but they don't really know what their multiplication facts are. They just know how to read the pattern, and it takes them a while. And so I talk a lot about throw out the tricks, and I'll ask them, what tricks do you know? And one of them's always like the 9s trick with multiplication. I said, okay, did that help you? Well, yeah, I know my 9s. And I said, you still have to use your fingers, though. They're like, well, yeah, I'll be in the store or something. And I'm like, you don't want your students to have to do that. That becomes a crutch, not a help. And so the things that I really stress are using manipulatives to let children see the relationships, to let them understand how the math works. So for example, on the, well, that might be on my other paper. Oh no, here it is. So this comes from their exam. The teacher could best help the students understand that a triangle is equivalent to half a square by showing them how to. Now for me, that is, you are giving students in kindergarten, first grade, polygons and shapes, plastic, wood, whatever, and they're working with them. Because if they're playing and they're, moving these shapes around, eventually they're going to put 2 triangles together, and they're going to say, hey, if I put 2 triangles together, I get a rectangle. So now when I get them in 4th or 5th grade and I say, area of a rectangle is base times height, what do you think the area for a triangle would be? And one of them is going to say, well, it must be a half because a triangle is half of a rectangle. And so they're able to then construct that knowledge themselves, and because they know the relationship, it's not just an arbitrary rule. Um, and that's not one of the 4 options that they have in here as the best practice. And so even on their test, they have to be not only aware of that best practice they need to use in the classroom, but also what might be on the test that would be the best answer for it. So I really focus a lot on that. So this last semester, it was, the last 2 years have been very trying for a lot of students, especially. I mean, it hasn't necessarily been easy on us either, but we got towards the end of the semester and a lot of them were just completely swamped, and I didn't want to necessarily add any more stress or any more work, and I wanted them to really have an opportunity to, because they weren't out, a lot of them weren't able to go out to the schools. So we had a lot of our students are parents or they have younger siblings. So I had one night where we just opened up the class and they could bring all their kids, bring their younger siblings, nieces, nephews, and we had a math night. And I took all my, my manipulatives and play money, and I had all the activities. And my students worked with all the elementary age children to actually put into practice some of those things that we worked on. So like with the fractions, and the dean always gives me a hard time because I talk about fractions all the time. But we know that if you're good at fractions, you're more likely to pass Algebra 1 in high school or middle school. And people just don't know fractions. They don't understand them. It's because they were only ever taught the rules and the steps, but they don't even know what a fraction really is. They don't know that there's more than one kind of fraction. They always think of pizza or brownies, and that's just the area model, and there's so many other models that we need to go over. And so the number line is one of the best ones and so I have a magnetic number line, and I have another one that's uses Velcro and has fraction cards, and then they can actually put the fractions up there. And so I've had a lot of comments on email and even in the final exam that was very helpful for them. They never, in all that time of learning, this was the first time anybody ever explained to them what a fraction actually was.